questions, keep your answers short. Keep your questions short. These guys will keep their answers short. And respectful, and just remember it will be stored for posterity on YouTube. You can follow along online. Our handle is @SMF Think Tank. And I think that's all of the housekeeping. We're the Social Market Foundation. We're a cross-party think tank. We've been around since 1989, which someone told me today is as long as Taylor Swift. Although I think we've done a better job at remaining non-partisan. Still had some pretty good hits as well. We have a great expert panel today to tackle the issue of how AI can deliver productivity for all. On my right, we have Michaela from Google, who's going to tell us about some really interesting work that Google has been doing delivering training. We also have Rachel Wolf from Public First, who is going to give us some of the underlying research and what we've learned about some of the training programs and what works and where are we in terms of public development on AI. And then to my left, Alice Campbell from techUK is going to give us a perspective from business. And then Councillor Kemahli from the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea on what's the opportunity from local authorities and what are they doing already. So, Michaela, perhaps I can start with you. I know Google is doing a lot of training on AI. How do you see this challenge of AI, and what's the experience of the training program so far?
Yeah, thank you so much, Theo, and to the whole SMF team for putting on this panel event. We were here last year announcing that we were going to do some research into AI and how that could be worker-led, and I'm delighted to share with you that we did it. That's a conference pledge that we stuck to, so you can all kind of read that at your leisure. What I potentially wanted to start with is, so Google's mission is to organise the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And so when we're thinking about AI, it is how can AI be useful to people right across the economy. We did some research with the wonderful Public First a couple of years ago that estimated that £400 billion worth of productivity gains could be made by using AI by 2030, and up to 100 hours could be saved by each worker by using AI by 2030, which begged the question to me of, okay, lovely, when I go back to my desk, what am I going to do differently in order to find those hours, and what needs to happen? Will it happen by magic? No. So we had this fantastic program called the Google Digital Garage, which has been, over the last 10 years, has been training people right across the UK, over 1 million people on digital skills. So the piece of research that we did was trying to put that theory and the practice together. So Rachel, did a national worker poll, we did focus groups, we picked 3 sectors to try and kind of measure the impact and where you would get that adoption change from. And we worked with schools, with teachers and school support staff, with trade union members, with community union, and then with small business workers. And I'll hand over to Rachel to go into many more of the insights, but I think what we found was that just a couple of hours of training can double adoption across the board, that half of that £400 billion times less likely to be using AI at work than men under 35. And so if you think about that in terms of the economy overall, the role of skills and training is really important to move that dial. We also found that workers were looking for permission, that just a couple of hours of training actually developed kind of sustained use after all. So people weren't, after 3 months, they weren't just using AI in the way that we taught them how to use it. They were using it in different ways and experimenting in different ways because we'd given them some of those fundamentals to start with. So, and the training was just bite-sized. So you're not going to become an AI expert in 2.5 hours. We can get you on that journey. The AI will keep moving, but that is that shift in terms of lifelong learning on there.
Thanks. And just a quick show of hands, who uses AI regularly?
Oh.
And keep your hand up if you've had training on AI. Okay, a lot fewer. Okay. Rachel, tell us about your research.
Yeah, thank you. And I should say it's very rare you get to be at the ground floor of a transforming technology like this. And so we had this amazing opportunity to really see what was happening in the economy at large, what was happening in particular sectors, and how rapidly it was changing throughout the economy and how much difference it made when you did the kind of training that Google asked us to study. So, as Michaela said, like almost every other technological shift of the last century, what you see is massive differences in adoption patterns, and you normally see younger, much more educated, and usually male men adopting technology much faster, and then you have this very long tail through the economy regionally in terms of gender and in terms of age, and that feeds through into productivity statistics. So you get this very fast adoption from the first movers, and then it takes a very, very long time for it to feed through the economy, and that's one of the reasons why you get slower productivity rises through the economy as technology changes. The kind of famous, you can see computers everywhere in the productivity, except the productivity statistics is in part because lots of people are still not using it. So what we wanted to understand was, is it as difficult to get that adoption up in AI as it has been in lots of other technologies, whether that's broad computing, spreadsheet tools, cloud, you name it. When you study these are very stubborn. And I think if I was going to have one message from this research, is that it seems vastly easier to both get adoption and maintain adoption of AI, at least at a basic level, but that basic level is enough to quite substantively increase productivity, than for almost any other technology, certainly, that we've looked at. And I just want to talk a little bit about why that is. So when we looked at small businesses, teachers, and union workers, what were the reasons they weren't adopting AI? And there's broadly three reasons. The first is, in the workplace, they're very unclear about whether they have permission to use it in the first place. So schools, this was most pronounced, but teachers who are often telling off their students for cheating by using AI in class were pretty unclear whether they were supposed to be doing it or not. And the bigger and more complex an organization you're in, this is therefore particularly true for the public sector, the more likely you are to be worried about whether you have permission to use something or not. So there's a lot of lack of clarity about that. The second is that they thought it was much, much harder than it was. So when we first talked to people, they were convinced that this was like learning to code. It was going to take them years to learn to adopt. The idea that this was as simple as typing some stuff in seemed strange to them, and therefore they didn't even try. And then the third was what you quite often saw was people trying once. Some of you may have had this experience. You try once, you get a rubbish answer, and you give up and you move on with your life, and you're busy. And therefore, people sort of given it a rough go, maybe asked it some comedy questions, maybe created one of those stupid little mannequin things that was all the rage for a while, and then moved on with their life. And what that meant was that a very, very small amount of training, effectively teaching people to use prompts and experiment with tools, had an enormous impact because it pushed people through the first experimental barrier, but then because how useful it was became immediately clear, and it was obvious how you continue to use it in your daily life. So if you think about other training programs a lot of you have been on, you will do, I don't know, how to do a pivot table, and then 3 months will go by before you're asked to do another pivot table, and by the time you come to it, you've completely forgotten it and the training was useless. That is like a continued pattern of most training in the workplace. That's not true with AI, as again, lots of you will have experienced. Once you start doing it, you get this kind of immediate dopamine hit if it's useful, and it's saving you time. So for example, one of the schools that we work for, and you can decide whether this is a problem with the bureaucratic state or not, but was spending staggering hours filling in bespoke pupil premium applications as part of the kind of regulatory requirement of the DFE. And they found that AI reduced this to a tiny amount of time because they could broadly say what they wanted, and using tools they could generate the reports that they needed to. Or you had people radically reducing the amount of time it took them to write emails to parents or respond to inquiries or fill in lesson plans. And so they were immediately getting this dopamine hit. And that meant in turn that when we returned 3 months later, what again you almost always see with training programs, which is people were really enthusiastic for about a week and then it's forgotten. Actually, not only was the usage as consistent, a very significant proportion of the people that we did the training with had gone to their colleagues and their own family members and trained them in turn. So you were starting to see the cascade effect through the economy. What does that mean for policy? If I'm just very, very rapidly, I think two things. The first is that, particularly in the public sector, you can do relatively simple things to put guardrails about what you expect people to do with AI and make it very explicit that you want them to do it, because people are nervous and you need to make it explicit you want them to do it. I don't think that's very hard to do across the public sector and for much of the economy. And the second is that we need to structure the way in which we offer training so that doing 2 hours is possible and fundable in a way that is actually very difficult in much of the training system today. It's designed around these big blocks of training, do an apprenticeship or not, do a degree or not, do a 1-year course or not. And actually for something like this, you can get gains very, very rapidly. The final thing I'll say, which I thought was fantastic, was that as one of the results of this training, what we found were people were much keener to experiment with new tools than they were before. And they were starting to uncover their own use cases. So AI is not a static technology. It has changed quite a lot, even since we did the research. Feel free to get us to do it again. But I think the hope is that once you start training people to do it, and once they gain the confidence, then they can move with the technology rather than feel like it's moving ever further from them. So of all the training projects I've done, and I've done quite a lot over the last 20 years, I think this has probably been the most successful, and it should give us some hope.
So we've got a near miracle cure
Theo's our resident
for AI productivity. So, but the idea of just 2.5 hours can make a meaningful difference to people feeling more confident, really starting to use AI, and also that they then take that themselves and spread it to others. So this is obviously what we want to see in the economy, that spread of that productivity. And so, Alice, from a business perspective, what do you think that government or businesses themselves need to do to really harness that potential for an AI productivity increase?
Of course, yeah. So for context, I'm from techUK. We are the trade association for the tech sector, and we have around 1,100 businesses, the majority of which are SMEs. And just to kind of caveat it, by being from techUK, our members either are tech companies or are companies that understand the value of technology. And that can't be said for the whole of the UK economy. There are many businesses out there that hear AI as an umbrella term and don't necessarily know which specific product or tool that means and how that specific product or tool can benefit them and their organisation. So I think there's fundamentally, we need to kind of begin with the knowledge gap that there is in the UK economy, and it's incredibly fragmented how people can interact with government to understand what those benefits are and what actually should be driving them to adopt AI more broadly in their work. I think one of the things with kind of specific training, particularly in organisation training, for those that are already in the workforce, is that quite often it requires people to go looking for it. And additionally, that's also fragmented. It's really hard to get clearly signposted support for specific tools and how that can, how you can use them, and also where you can get more information and understand how that works for your business. So I think there's a real role to be played by policymakers in joining up those dots and making sure that there is that kind of understanding of the technology, understanding of where you can get support for the technology and what it will do for you and your business, but also what are the parameters which you need to be mindful of, particularly if you're a smaller organisation. Do you have the right cybersecurity? Do you have the right understanding of what confidential data is going to be used in particular models and how that can be taken forwards? And I think fundamentally that's a real role for government to play, particularly on that trust piece, as well as it's kind of them that businesses look to for that support.
Thanks. Jen, we heard from Rachel the example of the school teachers using AI to navigate the application process for pupil premium. So from your perspective, AI can obviously be a way to navigate the bureaucracy of government, but is AI a way to reduce that bureaucracy from the other side? What's the potential for local authorities to use AI?
So, thank you, and hello everyone. I'm Kemahli. My role at KNC is I'm the Cabinet Member for Finance, Digital and Efficiency, which obviously AI has an awful lot to do in that sector. I'm super excited about AI, frankly. I mean, it is the game changer that we've been looking for in local government. You look at the statistics about productivity across the UK, and it's the civil service and it's sort of our regulatory models which have just not grown. They've not advanced at the rate that the private sector has. We've already seen a huge shift in the few AI implementations that we've rolled out. So, I mean, nobody in this room likes getting a parking ticket, but nobody really likes getting a parking ticket when you think you didn't do anything wrong. We've rolled out a tool that helps you appeal our own traffic wardens. And we've already found that 50% of those appeals come in outside of working hours. They have a very good hit rate because they craft very well-written appeal notices, not doing our finances any good as an outcome, but it's definitely making our residents and our visitors' lives that much easier. We've got to operate within the financial envelope that government sets us. Sadly, this government's just cut our funding by 40% over the next 4 years. So trying to find 40% of financial cuts without having a huge impact on our frontline services means we have to modernise, we have to find those efficiencies. Really good example about pupil premium, but that happens across a local council. Every time you apply for planning, you apply to renew your business license for alcohol or whatever it is, you're met with a wall of forms, a wall of sort of bureaucracy, and AI solves that. It makes residents' lives that much easier. Internally, however, it scares a lot of people. You have a group of civil servants that have been working in a council, and effectively I come in and say, well, this tool will mean we need less of you, and that's scary, not least because that's people's jobs, that's their income. But it's also that transition of saying, well, okay, I want to adopt this technology, but I don't know quite how to use it. So there's that sort of fear or unwillingness to engage with the process. We are trying to make it easy. Sadly, with Google at the table, we are tied to Microsoft, but we are trying to make it easier for our officers to engage with AI, but at the same time remembering that our duty is to keep people safe, keep data very safe, and sort of that financial stability. So I suppose as a local authority, we're unlikely to be at the forefront or the bleeding edge of this technology, but I think, frankly, we need to be, or at least the system needs to be, because it impacts on all of our daily lives. This is something that an efficient council will save us all money in taxes, council tax, and get you better services.
Thanks very much, Jem. I'm sure we'll all be pleased to know that we can more efficiently appeal for parking fines. I know that I've used ChatGPT before to successfully appeal a Sainsbury's 3-hour parking limit. So it was one of the first things I did. It's like, oh, this does work. One of the things that I think is where was I going to go with this question? Now that I've confused myself over the parking fines. We're seeing the scale. How do we get to scale on this kind of? What we're hearing is sort of almost a uniformly positive view of the power of training and development and the usage to increase productivity. But what are the barriers to that? And Jem mentioned this sort of, I think, the FOBO, the fear of becoming obsolete. That one of the things that you hear from people both in the public sector and the private sector when they're thinking about the adoption of AI is this going to destroy my job? So was that FOBO, was that something that came up in your research? And is that something that you think is a barrier? And after we've been through this set of questions, we'll come to the audience for questions. So do get your questions ready.
Yeah. It did come up as a bit of a barrier, but when we went into the research, we thought this was going to be the biggest problem, that there was going to be mass amounts of fear and refusal to engage in AI because of what it might mean for people's jobs. And that actually isn't what we found, even among the union workers when we did the polling and the focus groups. There was a bit of that, but much more was the view that they didn't understand how to use this, that they weren't technically capable enough of using it, and therefore they couldn't be part of it. So I don't want to dismiss those concerns or say that we don't need to think about it, but certainly from our research, it's much less of an issue for the population than you might think. And actually, broadly, people are more optimistic about the potential for AI than you might think. They are concerned about some specific applications of it which might remove humans entirely from the loop. But actually, if humans are in the loop, even in things like medical diagnoses, they're pretty optimistic about it. And actually, one of the things that surprised me most maybe because I'm a Tory, so this was my bias going in, was how enthusiastically union workers adopted this and were keen on it. I suspect that's in turn because actually for most AI applications, leaving aside maybe developers, it's not really obvious that it is going to remove people's jobs in their entirety. So much of what we do is intertwined with human interaction. If you think about a teacher, for example, children are hardwired to want humans, and that's not going to change, right? We're hardwired to like adult humans, and therefore you're never going to remove the need for that person. You might be able to enhance their effectiveness.
Michaela, how do you think we get to scale on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was trying to remember the number, but we found really early on we did some estimated to kind of set the scene on this in terms of overall in the economy, how many jobs would be insulated by AI, significantly affected and augmented. And thank you to my glamorous assistant for
keep going.
trying to
come
find the
back.
stat. And this piece of research was really trying to focus on those jobs where it's augmented by AI. So where, you know, the person in their role, they know, if we use small businesses as an example, those small business workers know the business, the customers, the culture, how to get things done in an organisation way better than someone kind of coming in from scratch. So how could we give them the tools to understand how the AI could make them more effective in that, of the things that they were doing day to day, that those skills weren't lost. And at the beginning, kind of the bad version of this is people go in and out of the workforce. That people aren't able to stay in their role, use AI to adapt to that and stay within that place, because the poor outcome is people are unemployed, then need to be reskilled within being unemployed to then try and go back into the workplace. You get a much better outcome if you keep people in your workforce, you upskill them as you go, and they can keep that knowledge and understanding of the business or the organisation or wherever you're working. In terms of getting scale, I think what we've been doing with speaking to the previous government and this current government was on trying to give a workable solution to how do you do scale. So being able to say, look, just a couple of hours of training that is role specific. In some of the insights, it was also working within a group within your organisation. So actually all the teachers going through it together really helped. Or all the people in a workforce, so then they could kind of learn from each other or keep each other going, or set up a WhatsApp group saying, oh, I've just tried this, rather than it being that kind of individual thing that maybe the young person in the office does but everyone else isn't troubled by. And so being able to show it's a couple of hours of investment to be able to scale it, but role specific. And then we're working alongside Microsoft, Amazon, IBM and others to work across the economy and how we can scale that to 7.5 million workers by 2030. So wish us luck.
So let's come to the audience for questions. Yep, one there.
Every other technological leap that we've had through history, right from the invention of the wheel, has created more jobs than it's actually replaced. Elon Musk, I'm sorry to bring his name up, says that this is the last invention that mankind will make, and that singularity is only 2 or 3 years away. We're already seeing record levels of graduate unemployment. We've got to face the fact that it's not the 55-year-old women that need to worry about it. They're all right. It's the 21-year-olds who are going to face a life where they're not going to need to work, the majority of them, and we need to be thinking about universal income and what they're going to do with that time.
Great question. I am skeptical of what Elon Musk says. I'm also pretty skeptical of universal income. I think the amount of money you need to make that meaningful is simply unaffordable for us. And on the graduate employment thing, we are doing some research on that, Social Market Foundation. There's clearly been an impact on graduate recruitment and entry-level jobs. I think it's hard to say that is as a result of AI rather than as a result of Rachel Reeves or other financial factors at this point. That the national insurance, the employment rights, the rising minimum wage may have done more. to impact that entry-level jobs. But it's something that we're looking at. I think you're right that it.
What about singularity being only 2 or 3 years away?
I think there's speculation on that. I'll hand to other experts on the panel.
No, I was going to say, I mean, the truth is no one knows whether singularity is 2 or 3 years away, even among, I mean, Kai can talk about this more, even among the most kind of advanced AI labs, there's huge debate about this. You'll have seen what Demis Hassabis said recently, for example. I also am a little skeptical, although it's challengeable, that even in that world, there is no employment available for young people. Again, if I think across the economy, and certainly if I think across the things that women tend to do in the economy, most of them are in areas where we are, as humans, hardwired to want other humans. We want humans to look after our children. We want humans to look after us when we're old. We love performance and the creativity of humans around us. So I would absolutely believe that, for example, whether the most sensible thing for me to get my son to do is to train to be a developer in the next 10 years will change dramatically. Do I think humans will fail to find employment for other humans? I mean, we'll see, but I am skeptical of that.
Yeah, I'll take a question here.
Thank you. Sophie Gunter. I am more relaxed about AI, but I'm not relaxed about AI combined with the digital ID. And I worry that the digital ID mandated by the Prime Minister is going to take us down the social credits Chinese direction, and I'd love to know what you think about that as Conservatives, and what we should be doing about it.
Great question. Social credits, sort of big brother Chinese version of AI future. How do you see that, Jan?
I mean, it's interesting. So I'm half Turkish, as my name might allude to. In Turkey, we have a digital ID. We have a little card I carry around with a chip in it. I can check all my taxes, all of my parking tickets again to bring them up, all sorts of things, all in one place. Does it make my life a lot easier than trying to navigate through 6 different ways to access GovUK, to get my national insurance number, to register somebody to work for my little coffee shop, all of the forms and systems that we've created? Interestingly not, but it does link, you can log in through your bank. So I'm very skeptical of the risks that come attached to that, not least in Turkey, and I probably shouldn't go down a Turkish political system, but I am wary of who has my data. I'm wary about who has my data in the UK, frankly, as well. I don't believe it's sort of so well protected that it can't be accessed. As a council, we're dealing with threats almost every single day. People are trying to get into our systems. We do hold an awful lot of people's sort of payment information, that sort of thing, so I can understand the appeal. The social credit side of it, I think that is, in the countries that have launched it, of course, we point to China and we can see that there is a negative link attached to it. But then you can point to Estonia, point to Turkey, and they've had this technology implemented for a number of years, and it hasn't led to that. It has, however, made it much easier to book a doctor's appointment or to sort out your annual tax returns. Naturally, Conservative, quite sceptical of the government having more of my information. I think it's really about being able to give people opt-outs. If any of this thing does come along, you have to still be able to do things independently and give people that agency. If people want to opt in with risk attached to it, let it be an individual choice rather than a government-mandated requirement, and that's probably where I am on it. I can't opt out of having a national insurance number or a driving license. I have to go along with the system as it stands, but I can choose to not learn to drive a car. So I suppose.
Alice, does techUK have a view on the digital ID cards?
Yeah, so I think one thing to just remember is that the UK has a really thriving digital ID sector already in terms of private sector, and I think one of the concerns that we have as the trade association is that you kind of, by mandating a national ID system, we will then kind of lose that really thriving private sector adoption and the use cases that are on offer there. I think that there's definitely a way that this can be managed and a way that this can be done to really, there are benefits to digital ID and that people should kind of be able to access those if that's helpful for them. But one of the really interesting things that we're hearing about digital ID, particularly mandated digital ID, is that there's other issues within the UK economy and particularly the digital economy that need to be addressed first. For example, digital skills, digital devices. And so there's probably a wider conversation that needs to be had about how can we use, if we're going to mandate digital ID, if that's what the government chooses to do, how can we make sure that no one's left behind on that journey and that everyone is able to reap those benefits from digital ID services in the UK?
Rachel, has Public First done any research in this area?
It's actually very interesting. We did do some research on forms of ID cards, and you might have seen this, which is people were much more in favour of them until they realised that Keir Starmer wanted to do it, and then the thing through the floor, which is an interesting reminder that policies are not judged in the ether, they're judged in part by who did it. I mean, I can give my own view, which is I thought what Palantir said, actually, which is that you cannot announce this without any form of democratic mandate when it is a core shift in the requirements of a citizen, is absolutely correct. And I would probably agree with others on the panel about making it opt-in. I suppose where I differ from some of my Conservative colleagues is I think if you have a government that wishes to be an authoritarian monster, it will manage to do so, digital ID or not. They managed to figure out who all the Jews were and sew yellow stars on their chests before digital ID. It is not a protection nor an enhancer of authoritarian government. It's a tool. And if what we're trying to do is prevent authoritarian governments, this is not the battle.
Yeah, I think my view on it would be that the one area where I think it would be incredibly helpful is the level of fraud that we have in this country. The single biggest crime, the one that affects most people and costs us the most, is online fraud. And if we can have a form of being able to identify people properly online that helps us reduce that, I think that could be hugely beneficial. But I think all of the concerns that you flagged
no one's mentioned immigration, so
No?
the reason that Keir Starmer came up with is not really relevant.
I think no one has really explained why it would work.
No.
In terms of immigration, because other countries who have digital ID are also suffering from massive immigration challenges.
If you're an employer, you're not going to ask for any form of visa, let alone digital ID, so that won't change that behaviour.
But my suspicion is the case of the benefit fraud in that village in Eastern Europe where they had... it was only because of a local policeman noticed that nobody seemed to be working anymore that they realised they were all over there and still claiming you see from over here. That is the sort of thing you might imagine might get caught by it.
I'm going to take another question. Yes, gentleman here.
Hi, Hayden Jackson Robbins, Luton Conservatives. The adoption of AI is going to just grow and grow. We know that its capability is going to grow and grow, but so are the harms that are going to come from it. I mean, just to take two examples, deepfake porn, deepfake bullying. I watched a video on YouTube the other day where I think it was Ben Wallace said that when the previous government tried to reduce the harms being done by a lot of the output from, sorry Michaela, the big tech companies, the big tech companies weren't interested in helping to deal with that. How are we going to deal with this as a governmental level, local government and a society to reduce the harms that AI is going to bring, whether it be stuff I've just mentioned or all the other cybersecurity type risks?
Michaela, do you want to take that? So how do you see the harms increasing and what's Google doing to prevent them?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for your question, Jackson. Yeah, we spoke with the previous government right the way through that, the drafting of the Online Safety Now Act, right the way through in terms of how that can be useful as legislation and, continuing that dialogue with the current government. I think in terms of the challenge of as the technology gets better, the harms get greater. Would say that at each stage, safety is absolutely at the heart of for Google and technological advancement. It does us no service for our users to have a poor experience online. So absolutely hear what you're saying there. And as fast as people are trying to create problems, we are faster at trying to prevent those. So completely understand that challenge, but absolutely baked into what Google's doing, whether that be Google or YouTube, and being able to meet those challenges.
Another question? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jim. I work for a creative comms startup, effectively, that's trying to use AI. And I think everyone would love to use AI to automate all the boring stuff. But what about when it starts replacing the creative stuff? You know, we've got Sienna sat in the corner here, and not to point you out, sorry, but just as a professional writer, you know, sometimes I found that when I try and get it to prompt stuff, sometimes it's rubbish, sometimes it's worryingly good, and I don't know if this was included in your study, Rachel, but you know, what are the panel's reflections on when it starts moving into more areas of creative writing, creative, you know, or some of the more artistic elements, and whether people will stop wanting to read things written by a computer?
Great question. Yeah, there was a day in the summer where I needed to write an op-ed, and it was a boiling hot day, and I couldn't get my thoughts going. So I got AI, and I got it. I sort of told it what I needed to write about. I said, suggest some questions to me, sort of over audio. So it would ask, and then I said, transcribe my answers. So transcribe my answers. And I was like, okay, that's sort of what I wanted to say. Now, put that into a better structure. It did that for me. I said, okay, now reduce that to 800 words. Reduced it to 800 words. It had all the things that I wanted to say, and it was all in order. And I shared it with our comms team, who was sort of, after a while, sort of politely were like, yeah, this is no good at all. So it sort of said all the things, but there was none of my voice, and there was none of the things that make you human. And I think there's another thing, which is we did a piece of research where we were looking at the role of writing in terms of learning. That one of the things, particularly for kids in schools, is that, you know, how do you actually learn things? It's sort of a slow, difficult process of getting things into your head. And just having ChatGPT do that for you means that that sort of cognitive difficulty, that to get that, if you miss that, you don't necessarily learn it. So I think there are real benefits, not just in the output, but actually in what you learn from going through those creative processes, because writing is a form of thinking, or at least for me. So I don't think AI is going to replace that, but interested to know what the rest of the panel think.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head around how automated processes and how processes can be automated, particularly those repetitive tasks. And I think that does free up space for people to be more creative, to explore and advance their own creativity and their own ideas and their own ambitions, which is the real kind of opportunity for AI. I think that's it, that where we can create that more freedom. And I don't think, as you said, Theo, I don't think AI will ever quite replace the human voice and the human nuance to particular circumstances. You see, even in everyday tasks nowadays, you still need a human to go over the work and confirm it's okay and change things. So that will always be needed.
Okay, I'll take another question from this side, over here.
Hi, thank you. Guy Marcus, Ada Lovelace Institute. I'm really intrigued, as councils at the moment facing kind of your current budgetary pressures. We've done a big piece of work on the use of transcription tools by social workers. And I think in terms of like flat cash savings, not Aaron, but I think it's inescapably true that if you have a transcription tool, you're going to save time. But we found some quite worrying findings in our qual, such as, and apologies what I'm about to say, a transcription tool hallucinating a case of suicidal intent that just wasn't in the data. So I'd be really interested to know, and also how can we help? So I'd be really interested to know how, as a council, you're thinking about how you boundary those, because that is a productivity saving in terms of time saved, but it's not time saving or cost saving if then you have a serious case review, right? So I'd be really interested to know, what are you doing to ensure that any evaluation is done socio-technically, and how can civil society and researchers help?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that is the thing that scares me about this. So, people will be annoyed if we miss their bin collection, but it's not the end of the world. Safeguarding and the concerns around children, but also adults with dementia and within our care homes. These are the things that not only are terrible for the resident and for the people, but this is what ruins councils, brings them down, and we end up with real sort of have big changes that have to come through within the town hall. I'm really wary about just latching onto it because it's the current buzzword. I think there is huge amounts of improvement. You talk about transcription. We live stream and film all of our meetings, but then we write minutes afterwards, and we write them by, somebody writes them. So it's an interesting area of the council where you could change it with very low likely risk. the area you suggest does carry that inherent risk. We have to make sure that our social workers are trained to be, and they are trained to be really, really good at knowing, in this case, children, so that if anything like that were to pop up, they immediately know it's just not it's not related to the child. The fear is that the system grows faster than the ability to manage it. Actually, I think our human side of that relationship is strong enough to identify it, but it means we do have to now create a sort of an overwatch to make sure that we're not running away with something in the pursuit of financial savings, that we actually end up with a problem that comes back to bite us down the line. So at the moment, we're really leaning on the things that there is that low risk, high reward, transactional activities. Invariably, though, the systems will move on. Another software company will come in and say that they can save us millions sorting out sort of children's care plans. It becomes very tempting, especially for councils. Fortunately, we're still financially quite solvent, but councils which are really in sort of financial distress will lean on these things, and we have to be very careful.
Anyone else want to come on in? How many of you who've used AI have also experienced hallucinations in the? So yeah, at least half of the people in the room. Questions? Yeah, should we go here? Yeah.
There's been a lot of thank you. A lot of conversations around AI replacing humans, etc. So I think a question would probably go to Michaela and Alice. What are your views on artificial general intelligence? Should we be worried?
Yeah, well, I'll just, I'm afraid, restate the answer I gave slightly earlier about like that we did some research right at the beginning that found that the majority of roles will be augmented by AI rather than replaced. So the research that we were seeking to do was how can AI make, I think the teachers and school example is probably the most straightforward, where if you ask teachers, like teachers' workload, are universally feel that they are overworked, they have too many forms to fill in, not enough time for why they, I'm from a family of teachers, from why they went into teaching in the first place, having that transformational role within, young people's lives and being able to see that impact that they're able to make. I don't think any teacher went into the profession to fill out forms or, kind of do things that felt repetitive. And so when we were able to do the training with them, which was, on a platform, they were able to then use it immediately in really practical ways, and also have that kind of two-way process of give us an example of what you would like this tool to be able to do, and we'll show you, or say it's not quite there yet, or which way. So they were like practical examples, but then also that they were learning from each other as that cohort, because they had all gone through it. And so, as Rachel was saying, in terms of people will want to be taught by humans, and there is such an absolute role there for teachers being teachers. But if we can help them with some of those elements that feel repetitive, that feel like that's not actually what they got into teaching for, then the machine has done its job, and we can actually have that bit that is being uniquely human and will actually change, young people's lives. Spend more time doing that. And when as part of the initial research, overwhelmingly teachers told us that they were working beyond their hours. So if we can make that workload feel feasible, and also that we know from DFE research that that's also one of the reasons why the government has a teacher retention problem. And so if we can help with that and getting the training to line up. And since we've done this AI Works training, we've now made it available to any teacher, any school right across the UK can do this training for free online, and we're doing those webinars at the moment too.
Alice, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think just to kind of come in on more of a business example, particularly kind of when we're thinking of small and micro businesses and startups, those individuals that have set up the organisation can't be an expert in absolutely everything they have to do, whether that be kind of HR, accounting, the business function itself. And so where you can bring in systems that make that easier and make sure that they can focus on their organisation and growing their organisation themselves, that's a real opportunity to be had for the UK economy to kind of help support those early businesses through their journey.
Thank you.
Question at the back.
Thank you. Emma Hollis. I'm CEO of NASBIT, which is the National Association of School-Based Teacher Trainers, so really interested in what you've been talking about in your research. I was really surprised, I've just only managed to flick through it, but really surprised at the low levels of concern you had. The overwhelming feedback we have from experienced teachers is concern around safeguarding and privacy, so I was quite interested to see how low that was in your research. I think the panel's probably answered questions around that, so I won't ask it again, but the other overwhelming bit of feedback we have from new entrants to the profession, so teachers coming in, young people out of school, is concerns around the environmental impact of AI. And I just wondered what your views were on, obviously this is focused on kind of speeding up adoption, but if we don't have a solution to the environmental impact of these tools, should we be speeding up adoption or should we be addressing that first?
Anyone take the environmental impact of AI?
Yeah, so as the technology is adapting, the environmental impact of that is changing as well as we go. And at Google, we have that environmental impact is really important to us, and you'll see kind of our data centers are world leading in that. But agree, like it comes up in the research, but the technology is adapting to make it less of an impact, if that makes sense.
And if I were just to add to that, I think one of the most fascinating things that's happened over the last couple of years as AI investment has gone through the roof has been the speed in development in low and zero carbon technologies that's gone alongside it because so much money's gone into it. What a small modular reactor can do and what people are willing to invest in them now versus 5 years ago, night and day. So I think you are starting to see transformations in energy alongside transformations in AI. Can I just link a few things that have come up, I think, which is, as Michaela said, our research and most people's research in this area generally finds that the vast majority of jobs can be augmented rather than replaced by AI. I suspect a lot of us have also been exposed in our own field to absolutely abysmal content from people who think that it can be entirely replaced by AI. Like LinkedIn drives me crazy. And there is a risk that organizations or individuals think that you can use AI as a substitute for all work and thinking, and it will fail. And I think the way in which we encourage teachers to use AI to increase their productivity is a totally different question from whether we want students to use AI in order to learn how to think in the first place and learn material. I don't think those are the same, because all of this productivity will disappear if we're not fundamentally producing people who know things, who can write, and through writing think, and understand that part of their job is to make sure the content they produce is correct. So like, I don't want us to mix those things up. We all see examples of this going wrong, and it's because people don't think they still need to put the work in. They do.
Asta, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just on the environmental impact question, just to add to what's been said, because I completely agree with the other panellists. Actually using AI solutions can help with the environment. Better usage of the grid, better understanding of energy usage patterns across the UK are all things that the AI can help with. And so actually, whilst we appreciate that there are concerns there that are kind of being addressed, there is also a solution to some of the other challenges that are faced when we think about energy usage by other sectors.
Okay, another question. Yeah, just here.
Hi, Oliver Callahan, Head of Public Affairs at the Information Commissioner's Office. I was just wondering where you guys thought we were in terms of regulation of AI, gaps, and the potential for an AI bill.
Regulation of AI. Do we need another AI bill? Michaela, I wonder what Google's view on that is.
Definitely not answering your very specific question. There is already regulation of AI and regulation of AI where it is applied, and I think what's interesting to note is that you have kind of similar AI in what helps you get the most green route on Google Maps as what could maybe be used for deciding if someone wants to get a mortgage. Now the harm or the challenge or the regulation of those two things is very different because the impact of one thing going wrong, or the other thing going wrong is maybe what your journey takes an extra minute, or someone doesn't get a mortgage. So we would say the kind of regulation of AI is in its use case in that element. But I would also, this is a slightly different answer, but where some companies are like looking to have workplace policies, what the people that we worked with were asking for was very simple do's and don'ts is actually what they're looking for. So that sometimes having I'm answering a different question, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. Is that, actually people are looking for do's and don'ts and how-tos, like, this is ChatGPT, use it for this, don't use it for that. Here's Gemini Pro, we've got the advanced version. Feel secure that you're able to use it for this and not for that. So in terms of that, what workers are looking for is more do's and don'ts than a kind of policy they can't understand.
And I'll say something which Michaela probably can't, which is I would be worried about the sort of direction that we're moving towards quantity of AI regulators in the UK rather than quality. We have a number of different regulators who are looking at AI. To have good people on AI costs a lot of money. We might be better to have a smaller number of people but higher paid as regulators on AI. But at the moment, we have so many different regulators that now we have a regulator whose job is to join together the other regulators. So I do feel like there is probably some need for review there. Alice, is there a review from techUK?
Yeah, I think, so we're really supportive of the white paper approach because actually a lot of, and we're using AI in a very general kind of way for this conversation, but how AI is being used in different sectors is very different, and the risks and the opportunities for each sector is completely different. And so I think empowering each regulator to appropriately regulate and control the risks for that sector and that use case is probably the easiest way to make sure that it kind of is fit for purpose when we think about regulation. And also the kind of, when we think about the AI bill, there's also a bit of a question mark around whether legislation is always the only way you can regulate. There are other ways that are brilliant, whether that be kind of codes of practice or just kind of a regulator engagement more proactively, that definitely are kind of the first steps that need to happen.
Chairman, any thoughts from you on the regulation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, local government, we have to implement regulations in a whole manner of things. Really, regulations there, it's for people's safety, right? That's why we regulate things, and it's also sort of to make sure that there's no areas of the market that get carried away. We've got a habit in this country, I think, of regulating our way into problems, and we're not very good at finding regulators that want to regulate less. So it's interesting that AI is barely getting going, and we're already thinking about how we can put the genie back in a box. And yes, we have to make sure public safety is maintained, and safeguarding always will be at the top of that list. But we've also got to let some technologies grow from time to time and actually build an economy that's going to develop and move us forward. And I don't know where that future is going to be, but we certainly can't immediately say, no, we've got to maintain the status quo and get back to where we are. I think safe regulations make sense. The approach, I think I support that. We need to look at different ways to make sure that happens. But it's outcomes. What do we want from a regulated this sector or any other? What do we actually want that to be, rather than what can we stop it being, I suppose.
I think we've got time for one last question. There's a question here in the front.
Hi there, I'm Sadi Chowdhury. I'm an AI optimist. I believe this technology is going to do us good, but all depends on how we use it. I think it's very powerful to upskill. To that extent, we're looking at, in an AI-enabled future, society is going to look vastly different. Business models are going to change. In that vein, how urgent is it that we introduce AI in our curriculum? Because the future of education is going to look vastly different. It's the calculator moment when the maths teachers went on strike. I believe we've arrived at that. Yeah.
So good to have a last question that ends on a note of optimism. So if I go to the panel, what's the role of AI in education, particularly in the curriculum? And then just any last thoughts that you want to add in the summary as well. Rachel, maybe I'll start with you.
So I think the the big thing we learned from this research is it doesn't take very long to show people how to use AI, at least in some of its core things, and to get them to adopt it and use it. A bit like a calculator, it doesn't take very long to show a student how to use a calculator. You don't need months of training on it. And I think that's probably how we should think about it in schools as well, that you don't need to upend the curriculum because it's actually a very easy technology to adopt. What you need to do is make sure that people have all the writing and thinking and knowledge that allows them to then deploy it well. For me, the focus, I think, on AI in education has to be, to what Michaela said, how you deal with a catastrophic retention and recruitment challenge in teaching, which is partly driven by workload, which in turn is partly driven by bureaucracy, and how do you free their time up to spend as much time with the students as possible. But the thing that's unusual about this, and that was unusual in our findings from the research, is it's very easy to train people on this and very easy to get them to stick using it. And that has the wonderful side effect that we don't need to upend our curriculum in order to get people to use it.
Alice, what do you think of education?
Yeah, of course. I think, obviously appreciate you've asked about kind of AI skills specifically, but I think digital skills provisions and training within schools and within the curriculum is incredibly patchy across the UK and incredibly hard for teachers kind of receiving further support to make sure that they're up to speed on kind of the opportunities of technology and what they need to be teaching is difficult. I think there's definitely a question mark about how we can make sure that technology is used throughout the education piece. Every job in the future is probably going to have some sort of digital angle or tool that's being used. So how can we support children and those kind of in further education and higher education to understand what the use cases of technology are across the spectrum, but also how they can use it safely and how they can use it within parameters that are appropriate for each situation. And I think there's definitely a role for government to play in joining the dots together for teacher training, for kind of even devices in schools, and making sure that we are kind of creating the AI generation of the future.
Yeah, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about my own time at university, and everyone was on Wikipedia. We were just lifting stuff straight off Wikipedia. Kids are going to move so much faster than we possibly can. They come to this stuff completely organically. They pick it up, they use it, and they use it in really different ways. The same with Wikipedia, the same with picking up books from the library shelves. You have to just teach people to think critically. You have to make sure that they're taught from a young age that actually not everything that's put in front of them is exactly as it is. And by and large, I think tooting KNC's own horn with 3 consecutive outstanding Ofsted ratings, I think that's part of what we do. But it's just sort of making sure that kids are taught in a safe environment, that they're actually then sort of able to grow into adulthood. I mean, if we're going to fiddle around with the curriculum, I'd far rather we teach kids what a credit card is, what compound interest is, and how to do their taxes before we worry about how they get through their homework one night.
Yeah, I agree with that. Michaela, some closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. The nature of work in general has changed, in that people might have a couple of careers now, whereas my dad left school, went to work at the bank, and retired from the bank after 40 years or something afterwards. You do what we're hoping, I would say, is that the education system is teaching young people how to learn, how to adapt, how to do that critical thinking, to be able to be applied to the situation or the role, and be able to kind of take the technological change as it goes, and be able to kind of upskill and reskill as they go. One thing I did want to say, we also run a primary school program, an online safety primary school program called Be Internet Legends, and last Thursday I was at one of those assemblies in near Bradford, and what we do as part of that is we've just incorporated kind of what is AI for the kids in that online safety. And it's a banana pizza, and so it's like, what's wrong? And it's, it's been posted by the internauties. Honestly, it's a brilliant assembly. You should all watch it. But what is fascinating is that you see these 7 to 11-year-olds, they put up their hand and they go, something not right about that photo. It looks a bit weird. It's AI. And, I've been to a lot of these assemblies now, and they always spot it. So I think there is hope that they can see things aren't quite right. They have that, critical thinking, that they know that this is there. So That's not actually really the answer, other than I'm going to take you away with the Internet Legends is a great program to look at that too.
Great. Well, thank you to all of the panel. I think we've covered a very broad range of topics on AI, and I think there was a really interesting conversation as we moved into education as well. I think I agree with Rachel. There is clearly, a role of AI and particularly in how easy it is to self-learn and pick up, and that opportunity for productivity. There are also some challenges with what is the role of AI in education, but that's a sort of slightly different question, I feel, about we obviously don't want AI to in the same way that Jem was obviously using Wikipedia to do his degree. We don't want AI to be used in that way. I'm kidding, sorry, Jem.
No, I definitely didn't.
But there's clearly huge opportunities from AI, as well as challenges that we need to overcome. So I want to say thank you to all of you for great engagement and questions, and thank you all to our panel as well. Please show your appreciation.
Thank you.